What would you do if your own father gave away your future and never looked back? That's exactly what happened to me the night my brother got engaged. In front of everyone, my dad handed him the deed to the apartment I helped pay for, without even mentioning my name. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just losing money. I was losing my place in my own family. In this video, I'll show you how I faced the truth, found my voice, and learned to put myself first, even when it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. If you've ever felt invisible or betrayed by the people you love most, you need to hear this. I was standing next to the drink table, swirling ginger ale in my glass, when I heard my dad's voice cut through the noise of laughter and clinking glasses. "To Jason and Sophie," he said, raising his glass high, "may your life be full of love, joy, and a good place to live." People chuckled. Jason leaned in, laughing awkwardly. I watched from across the room, arms folded. Then my dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded white envelope. He held it up like he was revealing a lottery ticket. "This," he said proudly, "is the deed to the apartment. It's yours now, Jason. A gift from your old man to help you start this new chapter right." The crowd clapped. Some cheered. Sophie squealed and threw her arms around Jason. He looked surprised but grinned, mouthing, "Seriously?" My mom wiped her eyes. Someone behind me whispered, "That's so generous." But me? I felt like the floor disappeared under my feet. The apartment? The one on Pinewood Street? The one I helped him buy? I stared at the envelope like it had turned into a weapon. I had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. The noise around me blurred, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. I kept hearing his voice echo, "It's yours now, Jason." No mention of me. No glance in my direction. Just smiles and backpats and champagne bubbles. 2 years ago, I gave my dad $30,000. I didn't just wire the money. I sat with him on the kitchen table with my savings statement open, heart pounding, as I transferred it into his account. We were talking about buying that apartment together. It wasn't just money to me. It was a future, a plan. And now it was a gift? To my brother? I looked over at Jason, who was still laughing, arm around Sophie. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he had no idea about my money. But right now, he didn't even glance at me. Not once. I couldn't move. I felt frozen in place, the kind of frozen where your body feels hot and cold at the same time. I kept waiting for Dad to say, "Lena helped with it too," or even, "We couldn't have done it without her." But he didn't. He just smiled like a king who had just handed over a castle. Did he forget what I gave? Or was he pretending none of it happened? I stood there, feeling like I was watching my own betrayal in slow motion. The laughter hurt my ears. The music felt too loud. I needed to get out, but I didn't want anyone to see me cry. I slipped out the back door and sat on the porch steps, clutching my drink like it could hold me together. My hands shook. Why would he do that? Why give Jason the apartment I helped pay for, without even talking to me? The worst part wasn't even the money. It was that it was done so publicly, like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't even part of the story. I wiped my eyes quickly, in case someone came looking. But they didn't. Nobody noticed I was gone. Not Dad. Not Jason. Not even Mom. And as I sat there under the porch light, heart pounding, one question wouldn't stop repeating in my mind. What else had he planned behind my back? Because if he could give away the apartment like that, what did he really think of me all along? I sat on those cold porch steps for a long time, trying to breathe through the storm spinning in my head. It wasn't just about the apartment. It was everything behind it, everything I gave, everything I believed. And as I stared out into the dark yard, my mind pulled me back to the day it all began. It was almost exactly 2 years ago. I had just lost my job in marketing, budget cuts, the company said. I moved back into my childhood room because I couldn't afford rent. Every morning, I woke up to the same old wallpaper, the same creaky ceiling fan, and the sound of my dad boiling tea downstairs. One morning, over breakfast, he said, "There's this small apartment for sale near Pinewood. Real fixer-upper, but I think I can flip it. Rent it out. Build something for the family." He made it sound like a project we could all be proud of. A smart step. Something long-term. I looked at him and said, "How much are you short?" He hesitated. "About 30 grand. I had it. Barely. It was all I had from my savings from bonuses, years of disciplined living. I was scared to let it go, but something in me wanted to prove I was still worth something even without a job title. That I could be part of something big, something that mattered. "I can give it to you," I said. "As long as you know, it's clear I'm part of this. It's a joint thing, right?" Dad smiled, the way he used to when I got an A on a math test in high school. "Lena, of course. This will benefit you too someday. We're family." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. I transferred the money the same day. No contracts. No paperwork. Just trust. After all, what kind of daughter asks for a contract with her own father? The next few months were full of energy. We went to the apartment together, choosing paint, dealing with leaks, even arguing over light fixtures. I felt close to him for the first time in years. Like, maybe we were turning a corner. When the place was finally ready, I helped write the listing. He let me handle the first tenant. I even made spreadsheets of rental income, expenses, projected profits. He chuckled and said, "That's the marketer in you. Always planning." I didn't realize back then he never used the word ours. He always said the place or the unit. I ignored it, brushed it off. Told myself I was overthinking. Sometimes I'd dream about moving into that apartment myself, having a fresh start when I got back on my feet. I pictured how I'd decorate it, where I'd put my desk, how the sunlight came through the windows. But now, all I could see was that envelope in his hand, passed to Jason like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. Did he ever really plan to share it with me? Had I been helping him or being used? And why? Why didn't I see the signs sooner? That question kept bouncing in my head, getting louder each time. My stomach twisted as I remembered the way he'd said, "This'll benefit you too someday." But when exactly was someday? Because today, it felt like that day would never come. And if I had misunderstood that deal, what else had I misunderstood about our family? Sitting out there alone on the porch, I kept asking myself, how could I have been so blind? But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the apartment or the money. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the last straw in a pattern I had spent my whole life trying not to see. Jason had always been the favorite. I used to tell myself that wasn't true. I didn't want to believe it. But when I think back, really think, the signs were always there. I just kept brushing them aside, just like I did with the apartment. When we were kids, I worked so hard to impress our dad. I got good grades, joined clubs, even took a business class in high school just to have something in common with him. Every time I brought home a report card, he barely looked up from his newspaper. "Good job," he'd say, like I'd just taken out the trash. But Jason? He once brought home a trophy for Most Improved in his Little League team, and Dad acted like he'd won the Olympics. "See that," he told me. "That's real determination." I wanted to scream. I had been determined all year, waking up at 5 a.m. to study for the SATs while Jason slept through alarms. But he always got the spotlight. At family dinners, when I'd talk about my job or my projects, Dad would say things like, "Marketing? That's not real business. You just sell fluff." But when Jason mentioned he was thinking about opening a smoothie cart with his friend, no plan, no budget, just a passing thought, Dad said, "Now that's entrepreneurship." And Mom? She just sat there quietly, smoothing her napkin, pretending not to notice. Every time I tried to say something, to point out the unfairness, she'd whisper, "Lena, please, don't make things harder." So I stopped saying anything at all. And slowly I started shrinking. Birthdays were always different too. Mine were quiet. A cake, a few gifts, maybe dinner out. But Jason's? There were banners, balloons, speeches. Even the one time he failed a college course, Dad still toasted him for working hard under pressure. He could do no wrong. And when he did, somehow it was still my fault. I remember once, Jason crashed Mom's car. I was the one who found the dented bumper in the driveway. When I asked about it, Dad snapped, "Don't go accusing your brother. You're always looking for ways to criticize him." I wasn't. I was just asking. But it didn't matter. Jason got a second chance. I got silence. And that silence followed me everywhere, even to the apartment, even when I gave everything I had. I think that's what hurt the most. It wasn't just that he gave Jason the deed. It was that he did it without even thinking about me. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like of course Jason deserved it. And, of course I didn't. I kept thinking, maybe he never saw me as equal. Maybe he never intended to share anything with me in the first place. I didn't want to believe that. I still wanted to believe there was a reason. Some explanation that made sense. Some part of the story I was missing. But the more I looked back, the clearer it became. The pattern had always been there. And maybe I'd spent years pretending that if I just did more, achieved more, gave more, he'd finally see me. He'd finally say, "I'm proud of you, Lena." But he never did. And tonight, standing in that room full of clapping guests while he gave my brother the deed I helped pay for, I finally understood something painful. He never would. And if that was true, what did that mean about everything else in our family? What other truths had I been too scared to face? Even after everything I remembered, every moment that pointed to Jason always being the favorite, there was still a part of me that hoped maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe, just maybe, after the guests left and the lights dimmed, Dad would pull me aside and say something, anything, that proved he saw me. That he hadn't just erased my place in this family without even a second thought. But that moment never came. Instead, I sat quietly in the corner of the living room, watching Jason bask in all the attention. His fiancée, Sophie, kept flashing the deed around like it was a prize from a game show. People crowded around them, clapping them on the back, asking how they planned to decorate the place. "The kitchen's already in great shape," Jason said. "Dad and I are thinking of just updating the cabinets and maybe repainting the living room." I felt like I was sinking into the floor.
Dad and I.
Those 3 words stung more than I expected, because I remembered being in that kitchen, painting those cabinets myself. I remember sweating through the summer heat while sanding floors, scrubbing walls, meeting with the plumber, buying curtain rods on sale. I remembered every single detail. And now it was like none of it ever happened. I was just a shadow in the background of a story I helped build. Jason didn't even look at me. Neither did Dad. It was like I wasn't even in the room. I tried to smile when people walked past. I nodded politely, took a sip of flat soda, even laughed at a few awkward jokes. But inside, something in me was crumbling. Mom caught my eye once across the room. She gave me a soft smile. A weak one. One of those "please don't make a scene" smiles she always gave when Dad was being unfair, but she didn't want to rock the boat. I looked away, because for the first time in my life, I didn't care about keeping the peace. Still, I didn't want to explode in front of everyone. Not here. Not with people watching. So when the second toast started and Dad raised another glass to his hardworking son, I stood up quietly and slipped out the sliding door onto the patio. The air hit me like a wave. Cold and sharp. I sat down on the wooden bench outside and let my hands fall into my lap. I stared at the grass, blurry from the tears I was trying to hold back. I thought about every version of myself that tried to earn his approval. The straight-A student. The polite daughter. The helper. The one who stayed calm when Jason got into trouble. The one who never asked for anything except to be seen. And now, I was sitting outside at my own brother's engagement party, alone, after watching my dad gift away something I helped build like it was never mine to begin with. I could hear the muffled sound of laughter from inside. People cheering, music playing, glasses clinking. No one even noticed I was gone. It was like I had vanished. And maybe in their version of the story, I never really mattered anyway. That thought cracked something open inside me. I felt a sob climb up my chest, but I forced it back. I wouldn't give them that moment. I wouldn't give my father the satisfaction of knowing he had broken me. But I was broken. Not just because of the money. Not just because of the apartment. But because that moment, out there in the dark, made something painfully clear. I had spent my whole life playing a role in this family, and tonight, I realized the script had never included me as anything more than a background character. I wiped my face and stared at the stars, asking myself the one question I didn't yet know how to answer. If I wasn't even worth acknowledgement tonight, what was I really worth to them at all? The next morning, sunlight poured into my old bedroom like nothing had happened. Like the night before hadn't completely shattered everything I thought I knew. But something had happened, and pretending otherwise wasn't an option anymore. I got up early, earlier than usual. I didn't want to run into Jason or Sophie at breakfast, pretending everything was normal. I didn't want another polite smile from Mom that begged me to stay quiet. I wanted one thing and one thing only: answers. Dad was already in the kitchen, reading the newspaper and stirring his tea like it was just another Sunday. I stood across from him, heart pounding, voice dry. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't even look up. "Good morning to you too." I stepped closer. "About the apartment." That made him pause. He set the spoon down and finally met my eyes. "What about it?" "You gave it to Jason," I said, keeping my voice even. "The apartment I helped you buy. The one I put $30,000 into. The one I thought we were investing in together." He sighed like I was bothering him with nonsense. "I paid the rest," he said. "It's my property. You were helping family. That's what family does." I stared at him, stunned. That's what family does? Use each other's life savings and pretend it never happened. "I never promised you anything," he said, standing now. "You're twisting it. You offered the money." I shook my head. "I offered it because you said this will benefit you too someday." "Those were your words, Dad." He shrugged.
And it did.
You had a place to live when you needed one. You learned about property. You gained experience. Experience? I said, my voice shaking. You handed it to Jason like I never existed. You didn't even acknowledge me, not once. Not even when people were clapping. He stepped forward. "I didn't want to embarrass you, Lena. Bringing up money in front of everyone would have been inappropriate." "No," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "You just didn't want to admit that I helped. That you didn't do it all on your own. That Jason wasn't the golden boy who earned it." And then a voice behind us. "I didn't earn what?" We both turned. Jason was standing at the doorway, holding a coffee mug, still in pajamas, looking between us like he'd just walked into a stranger's home. He stepped in slowly. "What's going on?" "Ask him," I said, motioning to Dad. "Ask him how that apartment was really paid for." Dad looked uncomfortable. "Jason, not now." But Jason pressed.
"Wait.
What is she talking about?" I locked eyes with my brother. "I gave Dad 30 grand for that place. Helped manage it. Fix it up. Everything. And last night, I watched him hand you the deed like I was nobody." Jason's face changed. "Wait, what? You paid for part of it?"
Not part," I said.
"A third. A big enough chunk that I thought I had a stake. But apparently, I was just a convenient ATM." Jason looked at Dad. "Is that true?" Dad crossed his arms. "I told her it would benefit her. It did. End of story." And then another voice, rougher, older, cut through the tension like a knife. "Well, that's not exactly true, is it?" We all turned toward the back door. Uncle Pete stood there, arms folded, his face dark with disappointment. "I was in the garage last year," he said, stepping into the room. "I heard you, Frank. You told Mark you were giving the place to Jason once he got engaged. Said Lena would be fine without it. That she'd forget." Dad's face froze. Jason looked sick. "You planned this?" Pete nodded grimly. "He planned the whole thing." Silence. Then Jason muttered, "I didn't ask for this." I stared at him. "But you didn't say no either." He looked at the floor, like he wanted to disappear. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't angry at Jason for getting the deed. I was angry because no one, not even him, had ever stood up for me. I turned back to Dad. "You didn't just give him a piece of property. You sent me a message." He frowned. "What message?" "That I don't matter." And the worst part? He didn't even deny it. After Uncle Pete walked out and Jason disappeared down the hall, Dad just stood there like nothing had happened. No apology. No regret. Just silence. The kind of silence that confirms the very thing you were afraid of. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Everything had been said. And still, he didn't flinch. He didn't chase after me. He didn't even ask if I was okay. That silence spoke louder than any excuse ever could. I packed my things that afternoon. There was no goodbye, no warm hug, no final attempt at closure. Just me, stuffing clothes into a suitcase in the same room I grew up in, this time knowing it wasn't my home anymore. Maybe it never really had been. As I zipped up the bag, I found the old envelope that once held the printout of my savings. The one I had shown Dad 2 years ago when I told him I could help. I held it for a second, thinking about the version of myself who trusted him so completely. She didn't know what was coming. That night, I stayed with a friend. The next day, I booked a one-way bus ticket out of the city. I needed distance, physical, emotional, all of it. Jason texted me 2 days later. I didn't know. Don't make this into drama. Let's just move on before the wedding. No apology. No accountability. Just a polite plea for silence. I stared at the message, and then turned my phone off. A few days later, Mom called. Her voice was soft, full of that familiar guilt she always carried but never unpacked. Lena, sweetheart, your father didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to? I said. He planned it. She paused. We're family. Can't we just move past this? For the sake of peace. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, not because I missed them, but because I finally understood what peace meant in our family. Silence. Compliance. Disappearing. I'm not coming to the wedding, Mom, I said gently. And I'm not going to pretend I'm okay, just so Dad can feel like the good guy. She sniffled quietly on the other end. I just want us to be whole again. I almost said we never were, but I didn't have the heart. Instead, I said goodbye, and I meant it. A week later, I met with a lawyer. I wanted to see if there was any way to reclaim the money I had put into the apartment. She listened carefully, reviewed everything I brought her, bank transfers, texts, receipts. Then she gave me the answer I already suspected. There's no written agreement, she said. You gave the money voluntarily. In the eyes of the law, it was a gift. A gift. I left her office numb. $30,000.
Gone.
And even more than that, the years I'd spent trying to earn something that was never mine to begin with, my father's respect. For a while I spiraled. I questioned myself, replayed conversations, asked what I could have done differently. But no matter how I sliced it, the truth was clear. I had acted in good faith. He had not. I moved to a small town 3 hours away. Nothing fancy. Just a clean apartment above a bookstore and a quiet routine I could rebuild from. At night, I'd sit by the window, watching cars pass under the orange streetlight, and ask myself, was I wrong to walk away? But each time, the answer came back clearer.
No.
I didn't walk away from my family. I walked away from being invisible. I walked away from being used. I walked away from people who expected me to stay quiet in the name of love, even while they ignored the damage they caused. They chose comfort over truth. Dad chose his son over integrity. And now, for the first time in my life, I was choosing me. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. How do you rebuild when your own foundation was never solid to begin with? What do you do when all the love you gave was never enough? A year passed. I didn't count the days, but I could feel it in my bones, the slow passing of time, like watching winter thaw into spring. I still lived above the little bookstore in the quiet town, and though the apartment wasn't anything fancy, it was mine. I paid for it with my own money, every cent earned on my terms. No help. No hidden strings. For a while, I kept waiting for the anger to come back, for the weight of what had been taken from me to make me bitter. But something strange happened instead. I started to feel lighter. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I stopped rehearsing imaginary conversations where my dad finally apologized, or Jason admitted he was wrong. I stopped needing closure from people who were never willing to give it. Therapy helped. A lot more than I expected. I remember the first time I said it out loud in my therapist's office. He didn't forget about me. He just never saw me to begin with. Saying that was like lifting a brick off my chest. Because for so long, I thought if I just worked harder, loved harder, I'd finally matter. But now I knew the truth. Some people are so committed to their version of the world that they will never see the harm they cause, especially when that harm benefits them. And I had to stop bleeding myself dry trying to change that. One sunny afternoon, Uncle Pete stopped by unexpectedly. He was in town visiting someone and brought coffee and an old photo of us from years ago, back when things felt simpler. "You've done good for yourself, kid," he said as we sat by the window. "I know it doesn't feel like justice, but walking away when you did, that was strength." I didn't say much, just nodded, letting his words sink in. "I wish your dad had seen what he was doing," he added. "But the truth is, you were right to leave." It meant more than he knew. Not because I needed someone to validate my choices, but because for once someone from my family actually saw me. I still felt sadness sometimes, especially when I heard Jason and Sophie had moved into the apartment and were expecting their first child. Part of me wondered if Dad would tell that kid bedtime stories in the living room I painted. Would he sit in the chair I picked out and smile like he built it all by himself?
Probably.
But I wasn't angry anymore, just detached. That chapter had closed. And for once, I wasn't stuck rereading it. I thought about all the people out there like me. People who gave everything to families that only ever took. People taught to stay quiet to keep the peace, even while their hearts shattered in silence. And I realized I wasn't alone. "I'm not bitter," I told my therapist one day. "I'm just awake now." Because waking up didn't mean I stopped hurting. It meant I finally understood that I deserved better. I deserved honesty, respect, a father who didn't turn my love into leverage, a brother who didn't benefit from my silence, a mother who chose her voice over her comfort. But even without them, I was learning how to give those things to myself. And maybe that was the beginning of everything I really needed. I used to think that what broke me was the moment he handed my brother the deed to that apartment. But the truth is, what really broke me was the silence that followed. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of what I gave or what I lost. Just a family carrying on like betrayal was normal, like it was easier to erase me than face the truth of what they'd done. And so now, a year later, I tell this story, not because I need sympathy, not because I want to reopen old wounds, but because I know I'm not the only one. There are so many people, especially daughters, who give everything to keep their families whole, who sacrifice money, time, emotional safety just to stay included, just to stay seen. And when they finally speak up, when they finally say, "This isn't okay," the world tells them to be quiet, to be the bigger person, to not ruin the moment. But staying silent didn't protect me. It erased me. And that's why I'm telling this now. Because this wasn't just about the money. Yes, I lost $30,000. But that's not what haunts me. It was the moment my dad stood in a room full of people and handed my brother a future that I had helped build without even looking at me. It was how my mother, who knew the truth, still asked me to stay quiet for the sake of peace. It was how my brother didn't speak up, even after hearing everything, because it was easier to keep the gift than to stand beside me. What I lost wasn't just financial. I lost the illusion. The illusion that love and loyalty would always be returned. The illusion that if I gave enough, I'd finally matter. But here's what I've learned. You don't owe loyalty to people who betray your trust. And you certainly don't owe silence to people who only want it so they can stay comfortable while you crumble. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most honest. Because if love means erasing yourself, then it isn't love, it's control. And I refuse to live quietly in the background of someone else's story ever again. I've rebuilt slowly. I've learned how to set boundaries. I've learned how to say no without guilt. I've learned that walking away doesn't make you selfish. It makes you brave. Uncle Pete still checks in. So do a few old friends. But most of my family, they moved on. They act like nothing happened. And honestly, that's okay. Because I'm not waiting for them to admit what they did. I'm not waiting for apologies that will never come. I'm not waiting at all anymore. I'm living. I'm healing. And I'm speaking because maybe somewhere out there, someone like me is still sitting at the edge of a family gathering, holding back tears, wondering if they deserve better. Let me say it clearly, in case no one else has. You do. You deserve honesty. You deserve recognition. You deserve to come first in your own life. It wasn't just the apartment. It was the message. You'll never come first. And I decided I'm done living like that. I chose myself instead. And that choice, it saved me.